Welcome back to this channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching What If Naruto Remember his past life as Edward Kenway. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time. Let's start the story.
As I lay on the ground with a powerful sword wound to my chest, the last thing I saw of Edward Kenway was my little son Hatham attempting to reach me. I could feel my blood being drawn from my body, and I knew that this world was not for me. As I lay on the ground, I felt a strong motion as the sword was pulled from my body. I knew how little chance I still had at life, and I watched my world go dark before my son. I tried to talk to him, but the words would not come. Instead, he called to me softly. The most startling thing for Edward was that he was wearing his assassin ropes and jacket that he had worn so many years ago when he had decided to live as a pirate at the end of that bloody war in the West Indies. When he woke up, he found himself in a strange room that was as black as sackcloth and that was filled with people speaking in various languages, some of whom were obviously whispering about him. He was only thinking about what had happened to his family because of the most recent Templar attack that, as far as he could tell, had killed him. As he was thinking about this, he heard a loud series of noises right in front of him, which caused him to turn around and look up to see a strangely shaped creature that gave him more fear than anything else. "Welcome Edward Kenway to my domain. I have been waiting some time to see you," said the strange creature, which had strange horns emerging from the top of its head and a dagger of some sort in its mouth. It then reached out with one hand and removed the dagger. "Forgive my ignorance, but who and what are you?" Edward gasped when he realized he was standing in front of a unique creature or deity that could easily see the level of shock on his face and laugh loudly, bringing the pirate assassin back to reality. "Yes, introductions are indeed in order, young assassin, or is it pirate? There are times even I can be quite confused. After all, I am not a god, but to answer your unique question I have many names." The death god then went on, shocking Edward, saying, "Some have called me the Angel of Death, Grim Reaper, but for some worlds I am simply known as the Shinigami, and that is why you are here. You have passed from your former life to this one." When Edward realized that he was actually dead, he was extremely shocked and asked, "What will become of me?" "What will become of you? Well, that is why you are here. I have a proposal for you. Have you ever heard of reincarnation?" The death-related entity asked, chuckling slightly before meeting his eyes. As the death god went on, "That is why you are here, Edward Kenway. Very soon in the world I wish to send you to a young woman who carries a great burden, is going to give birth to her child, and I want you to be the soul that merges with this new life to give this world a new chance that only the assassins have been able to give." Edward paused, then recalled a few stories he had heard from people he had met in the West Indies and nodded his head. Edward was taken aback when the death god went on, "I am afraid to say, Mr. Kenway, that unfortunately your new mother's burden will soon become yours as well, Mr. Kenway, and for that I am sorry. However, you are not going along on this adventure, as I have already sent one assassin to this world. When you are old enough you will find her, as she was already reborn into this world some time ago but will not be much older than you." Edward questioned him, "Nice to know I won't be alone, but why me?" "It was your friend Mary who recommended you for this, and when I consulted the other assassins of the past they agreed with her statement about you," was the only response the death god could give him while grinning. This surprised Edward, who asked, "Is she at peace?" "Yes, she is. She even managed to keep an eye on her child, who is living a good life, but I am also giving you a special bloodline, as the people of this world call it, to assist you in the many things you will need there, and will help you with the knowledge on how to build all of the weapons of the Brotherhood that you are familiar with, as well as to give you a fighting chance and maybe a special reward later on. So I will have my eagle vision even more powerful than before, with the ability to pass it to your children when you have some in the future. Now here comes the time for you new life. What is your decision, Edward Kenway?" He quickly decided, "I will do this, but please look over my family in the old world for me." "I will do just that," the death god said, nodding his head. "Now get ready because it's finished." Edward heard numerous voices speaking and realized he was being born as soon as the death god said those words. "Can't you do anything for the pain?" he asked. "Please, women are far stronger than men. She can handle this, just concentrate on the seal." Then he heard people screaming and what sounded like his new mother's voice calling out for her child, "Give me back my baby, young son of a bitch." He realized that he would only be able to recall fragments of what had happened. He heard his father talking to him during the first few hours of this new life, and the memories kept coming and going. "I have to go save your mother, Naruto. You'll be safe here, I promise." Then he heard them say, "We believe in you, son. Grow up to be a kind and strong young man. and the next memory was of something happening to them or being done to him. 13 years after the Nine Tails attack. As he slept that night, the memories of his previous life and his encounter with the Death God came flooding back. He woke up the next morning feeling a surge of energy and trying to figure out who and what he was. He immediately checked to see if his eagle vision was active and realized how much more advanced he was now. Then he said to himself, "Whoa. That means that I knew what my burden is too. Oh good God, I am so screwed over." After using his eagle vision to examine the room thoroughly, he realized that it was his parents' former home or apartment. Eventually, he found a section of the wall that hides a secret room from the rest of the apartment. After saying, "A hidden room, I wonder what's in there," he started looking at the wall until he discovered a tiny switch, which he turned on to reveal the unique study inside. When he first entered the room, he was astounded by the quantity of ninja gear and SEAL research materials that were there. He also found a significant amount of concealed cash, which was kept in a sizable case at the rear of the space. Combined Family Jutsu Library Scroll, he discovered, was printed on a rather large scroll. He had been going by Edward, or Naruto, in this new life for a while, and he decided that there was no reason to change anything, even though he knew that he would always be Edward Kenway. He opened the large scroll and found a number of incredible techniques that would help him on his journey to become the Hokage and, eventually, to rebuild the Brotherhood here for the first time in the history of this world. Knowing that he needed all the assistance he could get, he also knew that eventually he would meet this other assassin who had been around for a while and wondered just who she was. In the meantime, he would at least focus on his future. His mother's side of the family had rather high reserves, which made learning certain low-level jutsus nearly impossible for them without additional training. The scroll told him that there were a number of things he could do to improve his chakra control. He also discovered that the basic clone technique he was trying to learn was one of these jutsus, which he might not be able to perform at all without specialized training beforehand. A subnote on this technique also mentioned that you and one of these clones could help increase someone's training while reducing the time required for it. Fortunately for him, Scroll had a much more powerful version of the clone technique that created solid copies of the person and even allowed the memories of the copies to return to their user once they were disposed of. He started learning this technique with a smile on his face, realizing that it could be useful for many other things in the future. He also thought that he needed to make very specific items from his time as a pirate and his various weapons from the Brotherhood, since they could be useful in this world. After training with the Shadow Clone Jutsu for up to 5 hours, Naruto had to admit that he was both relieved and exhausted when he realized he could actually create a small army of clones that could serve as scouts, soldiers, and even a crew if necessary. He also spent 2 more hours simply testing things out and starting his SEAL education. He needed all the assistance he could get, so he kept doing this, even leaving up to 10 of his clones to study at the secret library. At the same time, though, he needed to start building his various weapons, knowing that many of them would be special order in many ways. Making a new blowpipe would be simple enough, but he knew that it would be much more difficult to find the proper poisons for his sleep and berserk darts. He also knew that making his cutlasses would be difficult because they had no precedence in this world. Yes, he was in some trouble because he knew that his most famous and beloved weapon would be the hardest to replicate in the world, especially since he wanted to keep it out of other people's hands. Fortunately, he knew how to make them, but he lacked the necessary equipment and supplies at the time. Since the shop made many specialty items for the various clans of Konoha, he was going to one of the few weapon shops that he knew would not only sell to him but could actually help him build his weapons. However, he knew that he needed to make a set of weapons as soon as possible and have them work, and that set of weapons was the hidden blades, also known as wrist blades. Overall, he needed to see what other supplies this shop might sell, rebuild his robes, and see what improvements he could make to them because it was said to have almost everything a young ninja, whether in training or in the fields, could want. As soon as he walked through the doors, he was filled with awe and a sense of wonder. Although he had been here before, he had only the necessities of his previous life available to him at the time, and now he was seeing the world with fresh eyes like never before. Home sweet home. Oh, what is that? Was all he could think as he surveyed the room and many of the weapons on display, realizing that it would not be as difficult as he had previously believed to recreate his arsenal. He saw how many unusual and striking weapons and equipment were in the store as she passed by. As he got closer to the counter, he saw a young brunette girl with bonds on the side of her head who, in his opinion, was stunningly beautiful. She appeared to be quite absorbed in a set of magazines and books that she was reading. Naruto, not wanting to waste any time as it was still early on this Saturday, approached the counter and made a noise to get her attention. "Excuse me. Tenten is your father here currently," he said, realizing that she not only worked here but was also the daughter of the shop owner. She went by Tenten and was already a fully fledged ninja of the village, but she still found time to help her family out in the shop. "Oh hi Naruto, he's in the back right now, is important?" she asked, startled by the question, and looked up to see one of her few friends and customers asking her father for help. This indicated that he had something very special in mind, meaning it was typically a clan matter. He nodded to her and then said, it's about crafting a very specific weapon. I want to know if your father and you can help me craft this particular weapon, and I need 2 of them as soon as possible for some of my specialized training. Hang on for just a minute and I'll see if he's done with his business in back," she said, nodding her head and acknowledging that she was also very interested in these weapons and wanted to see what they were. When she entered the back of the store to observe the numerous forges and specialized weaponry, he nodded his head in comprehension. The old man looked up to see his daughter enter and knew a special order must be coming in. "Who's it for this time, my little katana?" he asked. "You know I hate being called that, right?" Tenten said, rolling her eyes at him for that moniker. After nodding and grinning broadly, she went on to say, "Well, it's Naruto who came in with this special order." The older man noticed this because he knew who the boy was and who his parents were, so he assumed that something had to have happened. "Does he look all right to you?" he asked. "Of course he does, but he wants some kind of special weapon real fast as he is taking part in some kind of training that he is working on at the moment," her dad replied. As he walked with her out into the main area, he nodded his head and put everything down. He noticed that the boy was looking at almost everything in the store, stopping at a specific item that his daughter had made, but that not many of the ninja found useful. Knowing that there were numerous weapons he had not yet seen, Naruto kept scanning the store until he felt the proprietor enter the room and asked, "You carry rope darts?" He finally spotted one that he recognized from his previous life. Tenten was taken aback by his interest and curiosity in the weapon she had developed because, although she would not tell most people it, she thought Naruto was a rather unusual person because, in one moment, he could be completely silly and childless, and in the next, he could come up with a plan on the spot. She practically had stars in her eyes when he expressed interest in purchasing some of her own weapons, but she was also unsure if this was the person her dreams had been predicting would arrive. Since no one else seemed to be able to use this weapon correctly, her father was largely taken aback when the boy took the demonstration model off the wall and immediately showed that he could use it with a good deal of precision. Naruto turned to the store owners and said, "If you have any in addition to my special project, would you be interested in a set of tendencies in some brand new throwing knives?" "And what would this special project be?" Ten asked, noticing her father's growing interest. "Are you familiar with the concept of an arm-mounted retractable blade system? I have something similar to that will help you hide a kunai up your sleeve and have several in stock." "Well, I am impressed by that, but I was thinking of something quite literally that could be attached to your wrists and could remain hidden until you simply move your wrist and the blade pops out for you to use in just about any situation," Naruto said, expressing his admiration for the existence of a similar weapon in this world, albeit one that was less sophisticated. "Do you think you could help me make 2 of them?" Tenten's father helped Naruto recreate his wrist blades over the course of the weekend in the shops, and after some trial and error, they were able to produce 2 working prototypes that could easily pierce all of the elemental nation's armor. In order to re-establish his arsenal from his time as a pirate and later as an assassin, Naruto also bought a number of rope darts and specialized throwing knives. It was also at this time that he met the 2 former Grand Masters of the Brotherhood in his mind space. In addition to being astonished to be in this special place in the first place, Ezio and Altair were even more astonished and impressed by young Naruto. They each compared their past lives and then started making plans for the new Brotherhood's ascent in this world. Naruto was also relieved that the 2 elders would stay with him for a while because he would need their advice in the future. On Monday morning, he made the decision to test his eagle vision and see how he compared to his classmates in his class, since he knew he would need to go to the academy to finish his ninja training. He had made the decision not to bring the wrist blades as he strolled down the street, lost in his thoughts about how everything would change for him. As soon as he entered the classroom, he turned on his eagle vision and looked around the room for any potential enemies or neutrals. He was actually taken aback to discover that, for whatever reason, only a very small portion of the class seemed to be against him. However, he surmised that this was likely due to the influence of their parents, as the majority were mostly white, signifying that they were neutral toward him. To his own surprise, a number of the clan heirs showed up in blue, suggesting that they might be allies. The most unexpected of these was none other than Sasuke Uchiha, who many referred to as the Prince of Konoha due to the fact that he had been a victim of his clan's massacre many years prior by one of its own members. As he stared at her, wondering why he had ever fallen in love with someone who treated them like dirt, he noticed that Sakura's best friend, Ino Yamanaka, lived in a small flower shop owned by her family and, if he remembered correctly, worked there. He was surprised to learn that Sakura knew something about poisons. He then made the decision to resume his usual role as a buffer between Sakura and Sasuke, but he also made the decision that he would no longer tolerate Sakura's abuse and would no longer act or be the fool he had been for so long. In addition to flatly refusing Sakura's request to move aside so she could sit next to her so-called prince, he also warned her that he would retaliate with extreme prejudice if she tried to attack him. Everyone in the room was taken aback by the straightforward remarks, including the teachers who were just entering the room to begin the lesson for the day. For example, he had previously scanned them with his eagle vision to determine whether they were his friends or foes. Since he had resurrected the memories of his past life and accepted who he was in that life, Naruto had found it much easier to focus on the lessons being taught to him. The person with the score on his face, Uruka, was as blue as they came because of his eagle vision, but his friend and company teacher, Mizuki, who had silver hair, seemed to be a clear enemy to him as he glowed bright red. After finishing the day's lessons, Naruto left the academy right away with a specific goal in mind: to get help from Ino's family's small flower shop to solve his current poison problem. Creating the darts using the blowpipe had been easy, but dealing with the poisons would be much more challenging because so much had changed from his previous life. As soon as he walked into the small shop, he saw Ino reading a magazine for teen girls on the love of all things. When he saw that, he laughed a little, attracting her attention as well as her mother's, who came out of the back of the store and was shocked to see the young man in her shop at all. He then realized that she was only looking at him as he approached the counter to ask if they could help him with his current issue and maybe offer him some nice flowers to liven up his house a bit. "Hello. I was told this was a good flower shop and that the owners might know something about poisons, as I intend to incorporate into my fighting style when I graduate from the academy," said Ino's mother, a retired ninja, after noticing him examining several of the flowers in the room. "And what kind of poisons are you looking for in particular?" he asked, shocking the two women. After placing his hand on his chin in a contemplative position, Naruto said, "Well, the first one would happen to be a knockout poison. Not lethal, you understand, but just enough to give a person between 20 to 30 minutes of uninterrupted sleep to start with. There are several of those kinds of poisons that are available for use, but not many consider that kind of plan." Ino was taken aback by his remarks, as she understood that a ninja could benefit greatly from that type of poison. Her mother nodded her head, realizing she had something that could work. "That is good to know, but I'm not sure if you can help me with the second one, as it is a little bit more lethal in nature," he said, not surprised to learn that many of them would rather flaunt their fancy jutsus than use their stealth abilities. His next move was to ask what kind of poison he needed. She wondered what this type of poison was, so she was shocked to hear this. "The only way to know if I can help you succeed is to tell me what it has to do," she said. "Fair enough. The poison I am looking for is a kind of berserker poison that will make the one who is infected attack his fellow comrades and ultimately succumb to either their attack or the poison itself." Ino was struggling to think of a successful application for this type of poison, but she saw the expression on her mother's face and knew she knew something that would work. "Well, I do not have that particular poison, but I do know one that would do the trick for you. I must say that's an interesting battle plan you have there, but it does not seem very effective with how we fight." After simply grinning at her, Naruto remarked, "You have a point in close quarters combat, but this would not be a very effective weapon as he could be turned on you as well, but if you use it from a distance." His words, "That would be quite an asset to our combat style, but what kind of delivery device which you use?" caused her eyes to widen as she realized what he meant. "I'm still building it at this time. It's something I'm developing for my way of fighting, as I do not always have to be going in where angels fear to tread." After he graduated from the academy, the two women agreed to assist him with his poisons because they were impressed by what he was planning. After a month, Naruto had to acknowledge that things at the academy had been going much more smoothly for him ever since he had resurrected the memories of his previous life. At the same time, he had started to covertly gather all the elements required to become an assassin once more in this new world. However, he also had a desire to go back to sea, and he was reminded of his former ship, the Jackdaw, and his time spent at sea with his crew. In a previous life, he had tried his best to provide them with a comfortable life so they wouldn't have to return to a life of crime on the high seas. His assassin ropes, which resembled the originals he had taken from the trader Duncan, were the first item that caught his attention as he surveyed his assembled equipment with a more critical eye, taking in everything and identifying what he still needed to acquire. In addition to being jet black with hints of dark red in some places, it was identical to his original set. He had also succeeded in recreating the leather armor jacket he had worn, and he had to acknowledge that the materials used in this world were far stronger and lighter than those in his old set. In order to help him in his duties as an assassin and ninja, the garment was also fitted with a number of special seals. One of these seals would enable the outfit to develop with him, while another would make it more difficult for someone to find him because of his unusually high chakra reserves. Knowing how successful his pistols had been in the past against his numerous adversaries, he had also started to assemble them. His rope darts, which he had purchased from Tenten's shop, his set of wrist blades, and a set of throwing knives and kunais were all arranged on the table close by. He had also managed to reassemble the blowpipe and had obtained the sleeping poison, which he had already tested on a number of targets during his pranks in the village. Ino's mother was still investigating the berserker poison because it was a rather unusual poison in and of itself. He had also made new civilian clothes that were somewhat similar to his previous attire but still had an assassin's appearance. The new ensemble consisted of a dark orange outfit with a hood and a pair of jet black pants. Although it resembled his previous attire, it was new and even featured the Brotherhood's crest on the back. But today was the day you would receive his new cutlasses, his two most awaited weapons. Since Naruto had entered her family's store nearly a month and a half prior, Tenten had been even more perplexed by her bizarre dreams. Her father had even gone so far as to make fun of her for having a crush on a boy. Whatever the reason, there was something about him that made her feel both ways whenever he was around, even though she tried to project an image of a strong, professional, and feminine young woman. His presence alone was enough to make her feel good and like a young woman. Then there were the dreams she had been having since she was a young child who seemed to have been born a concubine and later became a master warrior who fought for the freedom of everyone in her strange nation, which Tenten could not identify as belonging to the elemental nations. As she pondered these thoughts, the front door of her family's shop opened, revealing the young man who had evoked her more feminine feelings. There were times when she tried to recall the name of this young woman but came up blank, as if this was not yet known to her. "Naruto, it's nice to see you again. Are you here to get your order?" Knowing that the weapons had captured her interest and that their design was somewhat unusual in the ninja community, she asked him. "Well, that's why I'm here, and of course to see your lovely young face, my dear. And also to ask, is that offer for a simple sparring match still open?" he said, nodding his head in her direction, pulling down his hood and smiling warmly. "Of course it is, Naruto. Now just give me a moment to go into the back and get your weapons," she said with a sincere smile. With a slight sway in her step that enhanced her beauty, he nodded his head and watched her vanish into the back of the store. As soon as she was there, he started to scan the rest of the store, wondering if there were any other weapons he might want to buy today. In order to identify any weapons that might be genuinely unique, he also used his eagle vision. However, he saw that a small group of Enbu were obviously watching from outside the window and atop a nearby building. His only thoughts on the matter were a mix of confusion and a little hurt feelings towards the old man, who he knew was keeping things from them but also knew that there was something else going on that had seemed to tie the fire shadow hands quite literally. He felt a little insulted that they still thought they had the element of surprise on their side because they weren't even bothering to hide that will. That was one of the things he and many others liked about being pirates in their previous lives. In his case, assassins were not constrained by the ridiculous regulations that had left so many people in need of food, warmth, and comfort. They took what they needed when they needed it and even managed to maintain some semblance of humanity and dignity toward others, though there were some exceptions, such as Charles Vane. Even though he was only a man with a difficult past of his own, he never let that stop him from pursuing freedom and wealth, even if it occasionally came at a high cost. He only wished that things had gone differently in the end. At that precise moment, Tenten returned to the shop's main area carrying a large box, which she placed on the counter and opened to reveal the two cutlasses in all their glory. Her expression was that of a ravenous wolf who has discovered a new chew toy to play with. After testing the weight of both weapons and confirming that they were perfectly balanced, he holstered his two new blades and watched Tenten don training armor and draw a special blade made for sparring and meant to withstand a lot of abuse. Her father, who was impressed by the design, walked to a nearby window to watch the upcoming match and was curious to see what these cutlasses, as the young man had called them, could actually do. He gave her a sincere smile as she put his hood back on and the two of them walked out to the small training area. Naruto used his eagle vision to see that the Anbu who had been following him had moved to a new spot to watch the fight as soon as they entered the field. He simply grinned at it and took the blades from their holsters. Tenten had to acknowledge that his fighting style appeared to consist of two components. The first was obviously being able to be extremely fast, and the second was being able to deliver strong strikes against your opponent that the speed would enhance. The two young people stared at each other for a few seconds before shooting forward with incredible speed and engaging in a deadly dance of swordsmanship. Tenten was forced to acknowledge that her current fighting style was insufficient to handle this type of opponent, who always seemed to be able to predict her moves. Every time she tried to strike him, one of his thrusts was able to stop her. The subsequent barrage of blows finally knocked her off balance, and his subsequent blow was so forceful that the cutlasses actually broke her practice blade in the middle. Tenten was staring at her sword in complete disbelief as this action shocked not only her but also the Anbu who were observing the fight. "Sorry about the sword, but I had no intention of losing," he said, putting his swords away quickly and approaching her. He then waved his hand in front of her face to get her attention. When she finally recovered her senses, she moved from him to her sword and back again, asking, "How did you do that?" Both her father and she, the Anbu, were in disbelief at what they had just witnessed him do. "I didn't really know it was going to do that, but I was just trying to win the fight," he said after making a thinking motion with his head. "I apologize for your sword." "It's okay, Naruto, it was just a practice sword after all," she said after meeting his eyes. He smiled at her and then bowed before leaving the field, leaving her to wonder what was actually happening. By this time, her father had approached and taken the blade away from her so he could examine it closely. This was a very good practice blade able to withstand most any sorts, even those that are using chakra for enhancements. This blade in particular was able to withstand for a time. "This is one very impressive design he has had me create," he said, blowing a little whistle of amazement after examining it for a few seconds. Looking directly into her father's eyes, Tenten said, "I know Dad, but whatever he did it worked extremely well." The Anbu team leader, who had been pursuing him all day to watch him and, if necessary, defend him, now stood in front of the Hokage, who had heard his full report on Naruto's accomplishments and their observations of him over the previous few weeks. After listening to everything with surprise, the Hokage said, "So your team doesn't know where he gets the money and the influence for the special weapons?" "No idea where he's getting them from, Lord Third. We inquired to Tenten's father about the purchases and the type of weapons he's bought but what?" The elderly Shadow questioned his soldier. "He told us that some of the more unique weapons are now under clan secrets. We were surprised to hear this as most of us know all about his past grades from the academy. It doesn't make any sense of how he would know this." Now that he had sent a juggling act to save the boy and conceal his family history from anyone who might use it against the boy and the village, the old Hokage was even more intrigued. The young man would eventually want answers about his past, and he knew that he would have to choose whether to give them to him or take them away from him. He could feel the years catching up to him. After some trial and error, Naruto was able to recreate his pistols and even improved their accuracy, loading times, destructive power, and range while he was in the hidden room of his apartment, observing the various tools of his trade. After completing the testing, he had to acknowledge that the guns were quite helpful. Regretfully, he had to admit that the mistake portion had been extremely explosive, and he was relieved that he had concealed his tests on this special weapon with his shadow clones in the Forest of Death. However, like so many other things, he kept them under wraps knowing that he would eventually use them in the real world. At the moment, though, he was more concerned with hiding his actual activities because he had observed that the Anbu had significantly increased their surveillance of him. He had to acknowledge, however, that having the Anbu following him all the time had pushed him to further hone his stealth skills, even though he had always been able to escape them and continue his training in the assassin ways in secret, regardless of how long they had been trying to watch him. He then examined a collection of clothes that he intended to wear to the academy today, including his primary battle robes and his more casual civilian robes. Overall, he could only hope for the best as this new day began, knowing that he still had 3 months until graduation and that the time to make a complete change was approaching. Few people in the village even knew who the strange young man in the dark orange outfit with the hood on his head was. He was primarily just trying to get to the academy and complete his term. Many people in the village were staring at him. In just a few minutes, he had arrived at the academy and entered, surprising many of the younger students as he went by. The academy's faculty was also taken aback by what they saw as he made his way down the hallway to his classroom. Since he wanted to see how they would react to him in his new attire, he had made the decision to arrive a little earlier than usual. Haruka was the first teacher to enter the classroom, and he saw the young man right away. It only took him a moment to recognize him. As he returned to getting ready for the day's lessons, Haruka gave one of his favorite students a sincere smile and nod in this direction. Naruto couldn't help but smile too, knowing that his teacher was anticipating his small practical joke. In a matter of minutes, the remaining students had started to assemble in the classroom and discuss their plans for the future. By this point, Sasuke had come in and was sitting in his usual position, hoping Naruto would serve as a barrier between him and Sakura and Ino. He saw a young man in a dark orange outfit as he was sitting down, and when he realized who it was, he laughed a little and said to his classmate, "Did you decide to change your look, loser?" He heard Naruto say, "I've been planning this new look for some time, but I appreciated you not saying anything just yet," after he had just managed to catch the young blonde's smile. Sasuke chuckled as well because he had enjoyed some of his classmates' practical jokes in private. He just sat back and muttered, "Whatever," while he waited for class to begin. At this precise moment, Sakura and Ino rushed into the room to compete in their customary game of who would sit next to Sasuke and who would have the regrettable honor of attempting to persuade Naruto to move from his seat. When they arrived and saw a strange young man sitting there, they assumed the hyperactive blonde would not be there today. However, when the young man turned to face them, he recognized them and realized that it might be even more difficult to get him to move. "Move it, Naruto." "Maybe I will, but when your blood has cooled and you're more reasonable to talk to, but as it stands I think he'd rather be left alone for right now," he said, placing his feet on the backrest of the seat in front of him, much to their dismay. He turned around and faced the front of the class as the final teacher entered the room, looking in Naruto's general direction with a disgusted expression on his face. The two of them were in complete shock and dumbfounded by what he had just said to them. Any normal member of the class would normally be intimidated by Mizuki's disgusted expression, but Naruto was anything but normal because he had already encountered people in his previous life who were more terrifying and intimidating in every way. If this silver-haired son of a bitch had ever met Blackbeard in person, he would have been terrified to death just by intimidation alone, which made him smile as he considered it. Yes, these 3 months were going to be pretty interesting. Generally speaking, the first part of the day had been, to put it mildly, pretty interesting. He had observed that almost everyone had been watching him and even chatting about his abrupt change in demeanor and attire. Naruto was eating his lunch under a tree while observing his classmates. He noticed that Hinata was staring at him and blushing a lot, turning her face almost blood red, and it was enough to make him chuckle. He heard a lot of people talking about him, which was not surprising, but what he didn't anticipate hearing was how many girls were now debating which of him and Sasuke was more attractive or enigmatic. He must admit that he was a little taken aback by their abrupt change, but he also saw that, over the past month, both Ino and Sakura had begun to at least take some things a little more seriously. Hinata, for example, seemed to be interested in boys but was still taking their potential careers very seriously. The lunch break was called over by the teachers in a matter of minutes, but instead of going back to the classroom, they were taken to the practice training grounds. Haruka was grinning as he called them all over and then spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear him say, "Okay everyone, we're going to have a small sparring session which we will use to determine some of your skill sets." Naruto had come over with the rest of the class and had put his hood back up in the hopes of avoiding drawing too much attention to himself. The remarks shocked everyone, but Naruto had a sneaking suspicion that the elderly man was interested in his abilities. He hoped he could escape this situation without revealing too many of his skills because some of them might be revealed in person to the elderly man. Unfortunately, he heard Mizuki call out his name. Next up is Naruto and Kiba, and remember, absolutely no jutsus or weapons allowed in this match. He obviously sighed with relief when a number of students faced off against one another, but he also realized that some of the class's heavy hitters were still present. Kiba had what could only be described as a shit-eating grin on his face as he realized he could humiliate the so-called class clown and possibly win Hinata over to him instead of Naruto. Naruto mumbled a few profanities and gave a little growl as he entered the ring. Since the little white dog could technically be regarded as a weapon, Kiba chose to taunt him with a bite in the hopes of making Naruto do something foolish and sloppy in the upcoming battle. Naruto realized that Kiba's partner had set up this fight. Fortunately for Naruto, he had continued his training in the assassin arts, including hand combat in the areas of disarming and counterattacks, which Ezio was a confirmed master of. However, Kiba would have no effect whatsoever on his opponent. With a sly grin, Mizuki began the fight with the intention of bringing down the so-called Demon of the Hidden Leaf. However, Naruto swiftly undid that plan by hitting him repeatedly as though they were insignificant. As Naruto continued to avoid him at every opportunity, Kiba's attempts to strike his opponent were met with nothing but air. The dog user in question failed to recognize that his opponent was merely attempting to exhaust him and infuriate him in the process. As Naruto the Dead continued to train one of the Academy's top fighters, the entire audience was in disbelief. However, it was evident to the instructors and Anbu that Naruto was merely playing with his opponent as the battle went on. After more than a minute of merely dodging, Naruto grew tired of it and changed tactics. Immediately, he grabbed one of Kiba's many wild punches and used his assassin arts knowledge to quickly break the young man's arm right at the elbow, bending it at an odd angle and rendering it useless for the time being. Soon after, a powerful haymaker was used to break the young dog's nose, causing blood to spill onto the ground as his body followed. He was startled awake as he hit the ground because his current state prevented him from fighting any longer. "Well?" Naruto asked his evil teacher Mizuki after glancing at him. Since the fight had only lasted a minute and a half, Mizuki and his fellow instructors as well as the Anbu were still taken aback by what they had witnessed. It goes without saying that he looked between the two boys and spoke in a surprised tone that conveyed his rage at being rejected. Winner of the match, Naruto. Iruka was taken aback by what he had just witnessed, and his shock was heightened when he saw Naruto approach Kiba, grab his broken arm, and quickly reset the bones. "There, the doctor should be able to fix you up real good, but if you ever harass these young girls again, I will break something far more valuable to me. Am I understood?" Kiba's cry of pain could be heard for a considerable distance. His face and eyes were filled with anger, and if you look into Naruto's face, you will feel a chill go down his spine. As Kiba watched the young man who had previously been dismissed as the class clown leave him, he nodded his head in agreement. Nearly all of the girls were now talking about what they had witnessed, including the fact that many of them had heard what he had said. What surprised the instructors even more was that, in their many years of teaching, they had never seen such moves. He looked over and saw that one of his customers had some rather close to him instantly and said, "Troublesome." Some of the students who had previously made fun of him now retreated from him, and he felt a little bit of complete terror. And what would be so troublesome, Shikamaru? Was all Naruto could do as he grinned at his old friend. The sluggish young boy said, "You for one thing. I've seen him looking at girls like they are pieces of meat, it disgusts me greatly." Having heard Ino gripe a couple of times about Kiba's eyes being in the wrong place, Shikamaru nodded his head. "You might have to do with his family later, you know that, right?" he inquired. He turned to face him, surprised, and said, "Let them come. I've put up with too much over the years, Shikamaru, to be anyone's punching bag anymore." He said, "How about earning their respect? People look at me and see a fool. If you pretend to be the fool, then only fools will attract in the end, but appeared to be the Shinigami and all men will submit," Naruto said, letting out a cruel little laugh. When Shikamaru and his two best friends heard him ask, "And would you be the Shinigami?" they were taken aback. As one of the class bullies approached him to try to scare him in spite of what he had just witnessed, Naruto grinned at him. The young assassin turned to face the young boy and said, "For my enemies, of course I'll be the devil. For them it's all a big show." The rest of the class, including the teachers, halted their activities and gazed at this moment in time as the bully came to a complete stop as the young boy he had once tormented strode forward with a sense of impending doom. "Give you a quarry or enemies something to fear. A hellish thing from some fevered dream." Put the fear of God in them and they will drop to their knees praying for death to release them from this hellish thing. This was the first time the young bully had ever seen this look in his eyes and face, and he actually began to back up a little afraid. When the young bully realized that his one advantage was gone, he actually fell to his knees and looked very scared. "Please don't hurt me, I was just doing what my parents told me to do," he said. "Just remember, if you or your parents want to see a demon, well then I'll show you one, and pray we don't fight together in that ring," Naruto said, grabbing him by the shirt and pulling him forward until they were facing each other. "Well, I'll say that it works," Naruto said as he walked back over to Shikamaru, and the young bully nodded his head quickly in agreement. The two of them then started to watch the remaining fights. Of course it does. The third Hokage was even more shocked by what everyone had noticed when he read the submitted report. Unusual fighting style he possesses, however I see it's quite effective as well. It's clear he has training from some source, but who could it be? Iruka said, nodding his head in agreement. I don't know Iruka, and honestly I'm beginning to wonder if he even has been trained by anyone else. It's possible the fox has been training him in some way, trying to keep them alive, the professor, who was also known as the third Hokage, thought. The statement, "Are you sure my lord?" would not be wiser for the fox to try to get him to free it? Startled one of the Anbu present. After hearing what people had to say, Kakashi added, "Maybe we're looking at this all wrong." When the third person asked, "You think there's another source behind his unusual skills?" everyone was taken aback by the claimant. Kakashi nodded his head and then responded, Do you think that's something else going on? Remember, when he was born the depth god himself was involved in the sealing of the Nine-Tails Fox. What if something from that night has triggered in him?" A young woman wearing an Anbu mask and sporting purple hair made a comment that shocked everyone in the room. "You're saying he's like some chosen warrior or something?" she asked. "It's possible. Before he was even born, Jiraiya pulled a fourth about a prophecy regarding Naruto." Kakashi replied to them. One of the Anbu members said aloud, "If that's true, then we are in a lot of trouble with the way the villages have been treating him." As he entered the classroom, Iruka recalled specific incidents, saying, "There's something else. It's the way he looked at my company teacher Mizuki." Anko had mostly kept quiet during the meeting, but he made the decision to say, "That guy gives me the creeps, and considering who I am and what I do, that says a whole hell of a lot." In response, one of the ANBUs in the room said, "I do agree with the crazy snake lady, that guy's bad news." Third let go of his pipe and said, "I have been curious about him myself as well, but without evidence there's nothing we can do about him until he makes a move against the village." "That's a dangerous game to play, Dad. What if he gets someone else to do his dirty work for him?" Asuma, the third's son, lit his own cigarette before expressing his opinions. The third comprehended what his son was saying. "I would like nothing better than to move against him, but without compelling evidence there's nothing we can do about it. Let us just pray that we catch him in a lie before it goes too far." And as for Naruto, as their leader continued to address them, "Keep an eye on him for the time being. It is painful that I cannot reveal anything about his past to him until he is officially a member of our forces." Everyone in the room was now paying close attention. As they all departed the room, their leader was left thinking deeply. "Naruto and Tenten, you two have changed the most in the past year. What's happening?" With only one day left before Naruto's class graduated, it had been nearly 3 months since he had started testing the village's defenses by playing practical jokes and demonstrating the true skill of the ninjas there. Unfortunately, in his view, it had the opposite effect. His pranks, which were mostly harmless, were intended to garner as much attention as possible. However, he might have been a bit too good because, in most cases, only a small number of people could actually see him perform one, and to make matters worse, he had only been caught in the act roughly twice out of at least 30 times. The village's security had not improved despite all of this, including the old man Hokage being fully informed of his activities. In a way, he was going to create his great masterpiece today, but he had made the bold decision to paint the Hokage monument in order to attract everyone's attention. In contrast to his initial plan, which called for him to simply write graffiti on the monument, he chose to paint it in a beautiful design that reflected each of the former leaders. He does the majority of this in broad daylight, which is the worst part. They really need to work on this stuff. He then leapt off the little painting platform he was using as if it were nothing, but his ability to run freely allowed him to get to ground level with little difficulty. He started to hear that people were finally taking notice of his most recent piece of work on the way to the academy. The door behind the third Hokage, who was quietly working on a small painting at home, suddenly flew open, revealing one of his numerous ninja. "What has happened?" The Jonin firmly stated. "He struck again, sir, we just know it's him." "What did you do this time, Naruto?" the elderly man pondered out loud. With a little hop to his step and a broad smile for everyone to see, Naruto entered the academy classroom. Ino recognized the person behind the most recent prank right away. She yelled, "Hi Naruto," loud enough for everyone to hear, drawing attention to him from the other students. "Yes, Ino?" he asked, anticipating what she would ask him. She smiled broadly and said, "Was that you who painted the Hokage monument?" In response to her question, he merely said, "Do you know who was responsible? But I am surprised that somebody did something to the Hokage monument?" With a look of surprise and amazement mixed with a hint of pride because he knew he would definitely get away with it. Iruka had just walked into the classroom when he said, "All right, class settled down." He was attempting to regain control of the situation. The class finally calmed down and let the lesson start. Since it would play a significant role in their graduation exam the following day, he chose to assess the students' transformational skills after the lesson was finished. It should come as no surprise that Naruto was the last to leave, but Iruka gestured for the test to start and started analyzing each of their transformations using himself as the model. "All right Naruto, just perform the transformation like everyone else, okay?" Everyone in the room was shocked that Naruto had, for once, followed instructions after he had a devilish idea and chose to not only pass but also put on a little show. Unfortunately, he then carried out his prank by changing into a much older man with a long black beard and placing himself on a nearby table with his legs up. The young man who had changed said, "All right ladies and gentlemen, I'll give you Blackbeard's honest opinion." As he looked directly into the eyes of the entire class, the man stood up straight and said, "You all ask me if this new ninja and pirate can offer you a life of riches, adventure, and plundered. Oh yes, for all of the gentlemen of fortune sailing these elemental waters he ranks among the most clever. There was a time I felt myself the deadliest monster sailing these seas. But this young man, the menacing looking man said as he uncorked a bottle of alcohol. After pouring his drink, the older man said, "He's a hellish dog who feeds on trouble and turmoil. I've seen him clear the deck of Water Nation vessel like it was nothing. He was fighting like the devils who possess our body and soul dressed as a man." This quickly brought the class to attention. "And he's a cunning one. He knows his way around every crack and crevice of the elemental seas. So if it's fortune and fame you seek, then Captain Naruto Uzumaki is your man. Just a word of warning, don't go meddling in his private affairs because there's more mystery to that man than even I dare ask." His next statement was eagerly anticipated by everyone in the classroom, including the teachers and all of the students. The older man then set down his empty glass and gave them a terrifying, unforgettable smile that made them all feel extremely afraid of death and destruction. One of the other students could not help but ask him, "Why did you do all that?" As soon as the story was finished, he burst into smoke, revealing Naruto sitting in the chair. He then got up and walked back to his seat as if nothing had happened. "Because deception and lies are our bread and butter, besides who says the story isn't true? Yet?" Naruto then said with a devilish grin. The following day had arrived sooner than Naruto had expected. It was his graduation day, and he felt compelled to demonstrate some of his new abilities and weapons, but only to a certain extent. After putting on his cutlasses and wrist blades, he added his new pair of kunai to his right thigh. He felt a great sense of pride and somewhat playful as he left his apartment to go to the academy after looking at himself in the mirror. Everyone in the academy noticed the new additions to Naruto's entire outfit as soon as he walked in. He sat down next to Sasuke, who was unable to help but look at his new equipment with some curiosity. The Uchiha was intrigued by these new weapons but chose to keep them to himself. However, this decision was short-lived because two young girls' familiar voices could be heard attempting to enter the room. Knowing what was going to happen, even Naruto cursed. "They do not seem to understand that I want to be left alone right now, do they, Naruto?" asked Sasuke. "It would seem so. Do they still stalk you?" he inquired. When he asked, "You have my sympathy," the Uchiha trembled visibly. "If only that would keep them from me." Sakura and Ino were making every effort to get a seat next to their Prince Charming, but when they saw the one person who could make them fearful of God sitting next to him, they said, "He's not feeling well today, maybe you could sit over there." This time, Sakura wasn't in the mood to take his warning seriously. She was about to reopen her fist to deliver a powerful haymaker when he raised his left arm and slightly moved his wrist, revealing a blade that looked deadly and had never been seen before. He then turned to face them and said in a firm voice, "Sit down over there, or so help me I will break something you need badly." That stopped them both and a large portion of the class in their tracks. The teachers had already entered the room and started the process of determining who would graduate on this particular day when the two girls immediately retreated and took seats in the adjacent seats in an attempt to escape the wrath of the class clone. Since Naruto passed test after test, almost everything had been easy for him. However, he found the hand combat portion of the tests particularly fascinating because he had to battle Mizuki this time. Overall, it had only strengthened his belief that Mizuki was a bad guy because he did everything he could to harm Naruto irreversibly, but he had underestimated two things. The first was that he was able to regenerate more quickly than usual, and the second was that he wasn't a new Academy Genin. Rather, he was a man who had sailed the seven seas, brought down empires, and demonstrated his mettle as a young assassin and a father. No, Mizuki was up against more than just a child. He was up against a seasoned combatant who had lost too many friends and witnessed too many battles. His own hardships in his new life had been enough to shatter some men beyond redemption, turning them into villains. Blackbeard once claimed that the sea had made them strong and hardened them, and that they had danced with death as a sign of respect rather than as a slight to its might. Fortunately, he was not like most men. Even though weapons were permitted, he had easily defeated his so-called teacher. Even though this man had only witnessed a small portion of his fighting style, it was still more than enough to attempt to predict some of his moves. That was something Mizuki would never comprehend as he tried blow after blow to break bone and tear flesh. Arrogance seemed to be this man's specialty, and it cost him dearly because his opponent had refused to do this or even consider it a wise move. Mizuki was flat on his back from Naruto's final move, feeling every muscle scream in pain from the force of the impact. To make matters worse, Naruto immediately activated his wrist blades and sent them straight towards his dishonest teacher's throat, soaking it just inches away and dealing a fatal blow. Iruka was shocked by how unfair the fight had been to his old friend, and he was even more shocked to see that Naruto had been in complete control the entire time. The young man in question held his wrist blade as still as possible and said, "You will yield." Mizuki was shocked that the young man had defeated him so easily and was now holding an odd blade to his throat. However, the match was called in the young boy's favor before Mizuki could even utter the word, "Winner Naruto." Mizuki knew that news of this humiliating defeat would spread like wildfire throughout the village, but everyone was shocked by the turn of events as the young man pulled his strange weapon from his corrupt teacher's throat and walked back to the crowd carelessly. A number of other exam sections went smoothly, but the final one, which tested his proficiency with jutsu techniques like the well-known clone techniques, which he was appalling at, was the one that worried him the most. He finally realized, though, why they were so hard for him to do after reading his parents' notes. His chakra was so abnormally high that it was hard for him to perform low-level jutsu, like a simple clone, because he lacked the control he needed to do it. The academy was clearly not the best place to learn control of one's abilities, despite popular belief. On the other end of the spectrum, however, jutsu such as the shadow clones were very easy to form due to the high energy levels required just to make them, and they would also become far more effective over time with his increased control. The academy's goal was to teach students the fundamentals and a lot of the village's history. However, special cases like his were frequently disregarded or punished simply for requiring additional assistance, which is why they had to try 3 times to graduate due to the same stupid move. He could feel the tension as he stood in front of his teachers, knowing that he still lacked the ability to create a basic set of clones, but he also knew that there was always a way to get around it without giving away his last remaining advantage. His transformation into Iruka was the first move they asked him to execute. He then performed the second move, which was to teleport himself with his teacher without them ever realizing it. Mizuki didn't realize he was sitting next to the student instead of his old friend until the transformation was lifted. Naruto then unexpectedly left his seat and returned to the main area of the exam room. "Alright Naruto, all you have to do to graduate is perform the clone technique, let us see what you can do," Iruka said, looking surprised by what he had just witnessed and experienced. He then sat down again and spoke to his young student with hope. As he completed the required hand seals, Naruto gave him a sincere smile. A few seconds later, white smoke filled the room, blocking their entire vision. 2 seconds later, the smoke cleared, exposing the entire space to be occupied solely by Naruto. Mizuki was enraged, knowing that his upcoming plan had been irreparably ruined, and they all turned to the teachers to gauge their reactions. However, Iruka was taken aback and smiled broadly as he gave his favorite student one of the headbands with the hidden leaf symbol on it. Naruto accepted the headband with great enthusiasm and made a simple bow to his mentor before leaving the room, but he watched Mizuki closely because he knew that something was seriously wrong with this man. When he was outside, he heard a lot of parents congratulating their kids on passing the test, and he couldn't help but think about his own parents, both from his previous life and from the present. But what really got his attention was the women's conversation. "I can't believe it passed." In an attempt to keep her friend out of trouble, another said, "Don't say any more, you know the law." Knowing that humans still had a long way to go, Naruto shook his head and laughed at their antics. Since ramen soup was one of his favorite foods in this new world, he made the decision to visit his favorite food stand and get some. At this point, Iruka sat down next to him and gave his own command, saying, "You are just full of surprises, Naruto." The store owners in particular were kind people who did not judge him as others did. Naruto turned to face his first real sensei after finishing his first ball, saying, "Will, I do what I can with what I got, sensei." "Well, I suppose that's true, so are you looking forward to your team placement?" Iruka asked, laughing uncontrollably. With a hint of regret in his voice, he said, "I really can't say right now, sensei. A lot of people in the class still look at me as the dead last and not worth their time." Knowing how true it was, his former academy teacher said empathetically, "They just don't see the young man I see, and I know that you keep things to yourself. I suppose you have a right to." On hearing this, Naruto laughed and remarked, "You have no idea how true that is, sensei. One could say that my struggles have not really begun." As he bit into his own ramen, his teacher gave him a straightforward smile. However, as he turned his head to see a young girl with bonds on the side of her head, he heard footsteps approaching. "It's been a long time, Tenten?" he asked. "It is a pleasure to see you again as well, Iruka-sensei. Naruto, can I have a talk with you?" the young girl said with a simple smile and a bow to her former sensei. After hearing what the Hokage had to say, Iruka nodded his head and ate as quickly as he could because he wanted to watch these two. "Would you like to come up real quick?" the two teenagers asked as they passed his apartment while chatting about various topics. She smiled at him and followed him into the building. They arrived at his apartment quickly, and when he opened it, he saw that it was rather spacious but also modest overall. Tenten was surprised to see that none of the armor or weapons they had helped him develop were visible, but she had to admit that the apartment was fairly clean aside from the number of ramen containers that littered the trash can. He was looking around when he had an idea and decided to check if it was true. He then started talking to her in Chinese, which caught her interest. Surprised, she asked, "How do you know that language?" Knowing that he had finally located his fellow assassin, Naruto nodded his head and said, "I learned that on my travels in the Caribbean, Tenten, or should I say Xiao Jun." She had never discussed those strange memories or dreams with anyone, so it would be an understatement to say that she was speechless. "I thought they were just dreams, and what you mean you travel to the Caribbean? I have never heard of such a place," she asked. "Maybe not in this world, but it is real. Like you, I lived a past life, now here I am," he replied to her. This realization shocked her, and she said, "So that memory of my meeting the death god was real, but there is still so much I do not know." He gestured for her to follow him into the secret room, opened it, and laid a hand on her shoulder before looking her in the eyes and saying, "They will come in time. Certain events that have happened to me have sped things up considerably." "What's wrong?" she asked, nodding her head in agreement as she saw his expression shift from one of surprise to one of rage. "I had some shadow clones keeping an eye on Mizuki. He just met up with 8 unknown ninjas with what looks like a musical note on their headbands. They have also just kidnapped the Hokage's grandson and are going to use him to take the Forbidden Scroll," he said, turning to her as she watched him hastily put on his armor and start arming himself with all of his weapons and equipment. Her eyes were obviously as wide as they could get now. He then gave her a few extra rope darts and said, "We have to move fast and without alerting them, which means no chakra. Can you do this?" to get her attention and to change her assassin mindset. She answered, "Yes." He then shut the hidden room and literally leapt out of the window, landing on the nearby rooftop and heading towards the Hokage Tower. "Good, now, Please try to keep up. Mizuki and his friends broke into the Hokage's office and gazed at the face of an elderly man who, despite his advanced age, appeared ready to tear their throats out. The elderly man stood to his full height and exclaimed, "You have got a whole lot of nerve doing this, you traitor." Despite his advanced age, he still exuded a sense of danger. As he held the rather large knife to the young boy's throat to emphasize his point, he said carelessly, Now, we wouldn't want your blood pressure to go through the roof now, would we, or for your grandson's blood to stain the carpet now, would we? If you would be so kind as to endorse my curiosity as to why you are doing this." "Why not? I've been waiting a long time to do this. After all, the pay from your fallen student was more than enough to start a new life and live quite comfortably," Mizuki said after laughing devilishly. In an attempt to save his grandson, the elderly man remarked, "I know who you speak of, and I know he will never fulfill his end of the bargain. I rather doubt that. Now give us the forbidden scroll and your grandson can live." To his surprise, the young child started to struggle for his freedom, saying, "Don't do it, Grandpa." To further emphasize his point, Mizuki quickly held the boy tightly, causing him pain, and then pressed the blade to his throat, actually drawing a little blood. "Yes, please, Lord Third, do resist us and then watch us kill this little brat before your eyes. That way you can mourn another family member you have lost." The Anbu was aware that there was nothing they could do to save the terrible grandsons' lives, but they soon saw two people fly through the office window, shocking and catching everyone in the room off guard. Naruto swiftly deflected the next rogue ninja's attack and then stabbed him in the back right where his long was preventing him from screaming out after activating his wrist blades and killing the first two of them. Tenten immediately entered the battle and unleashed a barrage of weapons that quickly embedded themselves in three other renegade ninjas, killing them in a matter of seconds. The two of them then closed in on the final two members, eliminating them in a matter of seconds without exchanging even a single word. Knowing that the boy was his only means of escape, Mizuki was now terrified, saying, "Come any closer and the boy dies." When Naruto realized he had a way to put an end to this, he quickly gestured for everyone to stop, saying, "So you hide behind a child, it just goes to show you that he's not a very good ninja or man." With an expression of unadulterated rage, Mizuki said, "You don't know anything about me." All Naruto needed was a clean shot while his opponent was distracted, and he had the ideal plan of action. Naruto had already reached behind his back and taken one of his guns out and prepared it for use. I know that you're a coward and that you couldn't even beat the so-called demon of this village. You're so weak and now you face an assassin which you know nothing about." He laughed. "When I'm done with all of you, I'm going to kill that kid as well. Say hi to the death god for me." That was all Naruto needed as he swiftly drew down his hood, exposing his face to everyone and eliciting the startled response he was hoping for from his opponent. Mizuki never had a chance to question the young man's sentence because, in a flash of movement, a loud thunderclap reverberated throughout the office. Nevertheless, Mizuki felt a sharp pain enter his throat and leave behind a huge hole that completely stunned him. Without any delay, Naruto hurried his old teacher and swiftly freed him from his prisoner. Then, as both fell to the ground, he drove the blade of his right wrist into the man's chest. Mizuki looked up into the young boy's eyes and asked, "What is going on?" He found himself in an unfamiliar place, but the pain was still there. "You're dying, that's going on. And I know you're going to have a lot to answer for in the next world. I did what I thought was right, I am after all a ninja." Naruto felt sorry for him. "That may be, but you don't hurt those closest to you, that is all you have done. May you find peace in the next world, down among the dead." After saying this, Mizuki eventually died, and from their perspective, the strange situation came to an end. To everyone else, it seemed as though the two of them had a conversation that was nearly nonsensical because the person who had been hurt shouldn't have been able to speak. "There you go, kid. Oh, and by the way, there is no easy path to the position of Hokage. It is something that must be earned, so practice hard and I will be seeing you again," the elderly Hokage said, looking at Naruto with some awe as he assisted his grandson in standing up. The young child questioned, "You promised, boss?" He attracted the Hokage's attention by saying, "Count on it. Now if you will all excuse me, I feel like taking a bit of a stroll." "Oh, an old man." They were all taken aback when he said, "We are going to have a very long talk, count on it." He then leapt out of the window. They watched as he simply exited the building after receiving a salute, ran up the side of a building without being seen, and vanished. He eventually reached a peak and started to see the village as he had never seen it before. You know that the world would be very different because his order would soon start to return, bringing freedom and hope back to the people. The theme song from Lindsey Sterling's Assassin's Creed series, with its distinctive vocals, starts to play in the background. After revealing his identity as an assassin to the villagers that evening, Naruto's life completely changed, and he spent the following day merely attempting to put everything in order. For starters, he had taken a straightforward photo for his ninja ID. Originally, he had a rather unconventional idea with a lot of face paint added, but he decided to cover a large portion of his face with his hood instead. Now that he was seated across from the third Hokage, who was currently using a fine tooth comb to go over the photo and paperwork, the third pulled his pipe out of his mouth and blew out some smoke before turning to face the young assassin and asking, "To be honest, I was expecting something a little more extreme?" The older man gave the young boy a startled look as he said, "Whoever said I wasn't planning on something like that, but I opted for this instead." "Now that is out of the way, we have much to discuss, do we not?" the third said, putting the paperwork down to be filed but knowing that a difficult conversation was about to begin. Naruto lowered his hood and met the old man's eyes, but the expression on his face was one that only battle-hardened veterans who had witnessed a great deal of loss and death would have. With a simple reply, "That works both ways, old man." "I suppose it does. What do you want to know? Why have you done so much to keep certain things hidden even from me, old man?" Naruto asked, leaning forward and closely examining the elderly man's eyes for any sign of dishonesty. "Where to even begin? How much do you even know?" was a question that the third had, quite honestly, been anticipating for a while. After looking at the older man, Naruto said, "I know who my mother and father are and I know that I am living in their apartment." "So you have discovered the secret room, but that still does not explain how you know of them," replied the elderly gentleman. The old man's shocked expression caught Naruto's attention as he remarked, "Some time ago, all of my past life memories returned to me like a dam breaking. I even remember parts of my birth." "You were reincarnated. Let me guess, the death god had something to do with it." "You could say that. Some time ago they said I woke up with all of my past memories and knowledge and of course who my parents are and of my burden," Naruto said after laughing at that. This left the old man speechless. "Have you met the fox yet?" he asked. "Not yet, I've had other things on my mind, as you can tell." The third decided to ask his next question after letting his pipe out a puff. "You mean like the unique robes you were wearing as well as the weapons you had manufactured?" This made Naruto laugh and smile. He then chose to clarify, saying, "That's one way of putting it, yes. Do you really want to know?" "Yes." Naruto cleared his throat and started his lengthy story, saying, "All right, but don't say I didn't warn. The best way to tell my story is from the beginning, I assume. I was born a wool merchant who dreamed of being more, eventually fell in love with a beautiful woman." The third said, "Eventually, though, a war broke out which threatened everything we knew and I saw an opportunity to gain riches. To do that I became a privateer, which is like a legal pirate." He wished he had a bucket of popcorn right now because, as you know, this was just the beginning and things were getting better. Seeing that he still had the old man's full attention, Naruto went on, "So I set out to sea to earn my fortune only to watch the war end too soon and be stranded in a place called the Caribbean. The kings who sent us do their fighting for them did not care about the consequences of their actions by just leaving us there. That changed very soon when we really did become pirates." "And then?" inquired the elderly man. "On one of the attacks we were doing against a small naval fleet, I met a man named Duncan who had just betrayed his order of riches and wealth. Was during this time that I first met the group I would become a part of. The Assassins." He stated that he remembered everything that had occurred. "It's a long time for me to realize what was at stake. Eventually I joined the order and did everything I could to supper group that wanted to control everything and make humanity into nothing more than a bird safe and sound inside a gilded cage with no freedom. That's no way for anyone to live." As the elderly man put it, "I have experienced similar things from people who thought they knew better but they only brought more suffering in the end." He was speaking with all too much insight. Naruto continued his story after realizing what the man was saying to him. "By the time I was done with them, I had suffered so much, and there was not a single person I loved standing beside me any more than those that I loved like my wife had long since passed on from this world. At least my daughter Jenny was safe." "You had a daughter?" asked the elderly man, who was relieved that he had not been drinking at the time. "Yes, and some years later when I remarried I also had a son. When he was still very young he watched me been murdered by evil men, and then here I am in this world now." In search of clarification, the elderly man said, "It's an incredible story, Naruto. You mentioned assassins. What are they in this world of your past life?" "In that world they are a group of ancient warriors and in many ways similar to us ninja, but they lived by a creed and a set of tenets." The old man said, "What are they? I must admit I am curious." To his surrogate grandfather, Naruto could only smile before saying, "Nothing is true, everything is permitted. We work in the shadows to serve the light, we are assassins." "What does it mean, and what are these tenets?" asked the elderly Hokage, struggling to make sense of what the young man had said. "Well, first the tenets. The first tenet of the creed: stay your blade from the flesh of an innocent." The first tenet's admission that few of his own ninja could avoid occasionally killing innocent people on the battlefield and occasionally by accident startled the elderly man. The next tenet is, become one with the crowd, use them to mask you to become one of them and strike. In that world is where the term the blade in the crowd came from. As he tried to understand what all of this meant, the elderly man had to confess that he was at a loss for words. And the final tenets, do not compromise the brotherhood. The elderly man was taken aback by everything he had heard, but he was unable to understand the first few lines of the creed. "I understand the tenets, but?" he asked. Naruto questioned him, "You still can't figure out what the creed means, can you?" The door to his office exploded before the third could ask any more questions, revealing his grandson running in before tripping and dropping the scarf around his neck to the floor. The young boy then looked up at the still sitting Naruto, pointed at him, and yelled, "You tripped me, didn't you?" for everyone to hear. After the young boy saw who he was accusing, he became a little afraid after realizing who it was and felt a little embarrassed. Naruto, on the other hand, got up and lifted the boy by the shirt to bring him up to eye level before using his other hand to hold the scarf in front of the boy's face. The young boy could only nod his head in comprehension as he considered what had transpired. "Here's what you should be pointing at, it's just a little too long for the kind of work we do." Then, as his personal teacher came in and gave Naruto a quick glance without trying to conceal what he had discussed with the person in front of him, he said in a cheerful tone, "Sure thing, boss." He then saw Naruto roll his eyes at him, set the boy down, and swiftly went for some hand signals before transforming into one of the most stunning women they had ever seen. The tutor and the Hokage then flew back in a shower of blood from their noses. "Let the honorable grandson go, you monster." The boy asked, "How did you do that?" in complete shock. After giving him his signature grin, Naruto started to leave the room, saying, "Trade secret kid, oh an old man." "Yes?" The third had recovered swiftly from the prankster's unexpected attack. Naruto turned and left the room carefree, but with his senses sharpened, saying, "We will finish this conversation a bit later. Until then." "Who was that grandpa? He's so cool," the boy asked, pointing to the young man who had gone, while looking his grandfather in the eyes. Hearing this, the elderly man couldn't help but laugh. "It's a long story, Konohamaru, but let's just say that he's more than he appears to be, but wow, what a jutsu." The young boy said, "You sound like a pervert, grandpa?" The old Hokage couldn't contain his laughter when he said, "You'll understand when you are older, but until then, just go out and play for a bit but don't wander off, okay?" Without even glancing at his fallen teacher, who was just rising from the surprise attack, the young boy sighed and nodded his head as he left the room. On his way to his favorite restaurant, Naruto just strolled through the village, reflecting on everything that had happened recently. He noticed, as he peered through a window, that a box painted to resemble a rock was following him, and it wasn't doing it very stealthily. He watched the box follow him as he went about his business, thinking, "This kid needs some serious guidance, he's not going to live very long out in the field if he keeps this up." After a while, he went into the ramen stand, sat down where he usually does, and looked up into the face of an older man who was preparing a fresh batch of noodles from scratch. The older man saw that one of his favorite customers had just entered and chose to take his order. The elderly man grinned and said, "Hey Naruto, I heard you graduated from the academy." With a smile on his face, Naruto pulled back his hood and responded, "Yep, I did. It wasn't easy but was worth it in the end." He made it clear that there would only be one bowl by saying, "I'll bet it was, so what will it be today, and to celebrate your graduation I give you one bowl for free." He looked at the menu and said, "Sounds reasonable, I'll have a super beef and a farmer's delight." He knew that nothing on it would not appeal to someone. After hastily writing down the order and starting to prepare them, the elderly man noticed a strangely colored box with what appeared to be eyes staring at them just outside his food stand. Observing a look on his customer's face, the elderly man remarked, "I've seen a lot of strange things, but that box has gotten to be one of the weirdest things I've seen in a while." Naruto took a sip of his tea and remarked, "The kid has no comprehension of the word stealth or its meaning for that matter. Personally, I blame his teacher." After being taken aback by the remark, the elderly man asked, "So who is it?" After realizing that his young client had known the child was present the entire time. He merely noted the shocked expression on the elderly cook's face and said, "The Hokage's grandson." He just asked, "That's the kid you saved, right?" and received a simple nod. With a hint of devilishness in his voice, he asked, "What are you thinking, old man?" As he finished preparing the first bowl, the elderly man leaned forward and remarked, "Perhaps he wants to learn from you." After chuckling at that, Naruto grabbed an extra chopstick and said, "Well, let's see what he wants then." The young boy inside the box, who appeared both shocked and amazed, was revealed when Naruto threw the chopstick at it. The boy then ran into the stand and sat down next to the young assassin. The young boy remarked, "That was so cool, I knew you were a great ninja." Knowing that a little reality might help them, Naruto then made the decision to break out of his bubble a little. "Kid, anybody could see you wearing just a box. In fact, once or twice I thought I saw a dog debating whether or not to use you as a restroom." The statement actually caught Konohamaru off guard, but as he turned back to the box, he saw that some of his strategies appeared a bit juvenile. "Don't get me wrong, kid, you have potential, but what you need right now is the proper guidance," Naruto said after placing the child on the back. "But my teacher says that I'm doing fine and that he can teach me all the shortcuts to being Hokage." The young boy was taken aback by the statement because he believed that his grandfather had provided him with the best teacher available. He asked the boy, who was speechless, and was just the same guy who flew back in a spray of blood from his nose at seeing my sexy jutsu, which I might add was created to deal with perverts. He just said, "Yeah, that was him. What if you were to teach me that jutsu?" The young boy thought suddenly. Naruto was taken aback by the boy's suggestion and understood that he could test the boy and, ideally, instill in him the value of surviving if he had the capacity to be a good ninja or a member of the Brotherhood. Observing the boy's shocked expression, he said, "If I teach you it won't be easy and there is no shortcut, okay? But my teacher said there's always shortcuts?" He saw the boy's surprised expression and remarked, "For some shortcut is a quick and easy path, yes, but it does not carry the hardships and trials the other way carries with it which prepare you for everything to come." With a broad smile on his face, even the elderly ramen-ship was taken aback by this statement. Naruto then chose to pose another query. "So why did you storm into your grandfather's office like you did anyways?" "I want to be the Hokage so everyone would see me as me and not the grandson of the Great Third," he replied. Naruto couldn't help but giggle when the thought, "I see where you're coming from, but you have to remember that being the Hokage is a very big responsibility and there is no quick and easy path. In fact, before you try to make people see you for you and not the other way around." Naruto turned to face the elderly chef and asked, "You think you can give him a bowl of soup as well?" The young boy was genuinely taken aback by the remarks and felt a great deal of confidence knowing that his ambition was achievable. "No problem. Oh, and kid, just remember he'll be the next Hokage at this rate, so you will have a bit of competition or you'll take the position when he steps down," the elderly chef said, nodding his head as he prepared a simple bowl for the young boy, knowing that he could build his grandfather later because he still had a business to run. A group of men with a look of greed about them entered the restaurant before the young boy could even make a sound or declare that he was this young man's eternal rival. Once his two bodyguards left the restaurant, the man in the center said, "I've let you think about it long enough, old man. I think it's high time you pay me what you owe me." He was confident that his employer could take care of himself. "I don't owe you anything and I never agreed to your so-called protection. You may have people on civilian council who cover for your ass, but I'm not one of them," the elderly chef said, displaying a defiant expression toward him. "You're going to pay for that one, old man. Maybe I'll send some of my boys pay your daughter a visit," the young man said, oblivious to the two customers. With one of his meat cleavers in hand, the elderly chef remarked, "You do that and you're leaving in a body bag. I will fight you if I have to." The young fool was sitting at the bar, unaware that the young assassin was waiting for the perfect moment to strike. He said, I can kill you right here right now and take everything you own, and not even that pathetic old demon-loving cage can do anything to stop." After hearing this pitiful excuse of a man insult his grandfather, Konohamaru became furious. However, he saw the sudden change in his future teacher's demeanor as Naruto pulled his hood up to hide his face and punched him out of the stand in a single, lightning, fast motion. Knowing that there was nothing they could do to stop this man because his family had too much power, everyone outside the restaurant had gathered to watch him fly out of the establishment. When he stood up again, he saw the young man with the dark orange hood leaving carelessly. The young man became furious and pulled out a long knife, walking calmly forward in the hopes of killing the young man. After rapidly activating his left wrist blade and waiting for the young fool to make his fatal error, Naruto executed a basic dock with the long knife before raising his left arm in a slashing motion, severing the man's throat. His companions were taken aback by what they saw, as it seemed that he was holding neither a knife nor a kunai. The young assassin then attacked the two front-line bodyguards out of the three that were left, but the young man dismantled them with the most lethal efficiency possible using his wrist blades. The remaining bodyguards, however, received the message that their boss had chosen the worst possible times to try to assert his power, while the final member of this entourage was completely terrified as Naruto pointed back at the stand to reveal the Hokage's grandson completely enthralled with what he had just witnessed. The numerous Anbu that now surrounded him were then indicated by Naruto. As the young boy with the movements of a purpose-driven, trained killer walked back into the stand to finish his meal, the lead Anbu nodded her head and went about gathering up the survivors and bodies. "Tell the old man I said hi guys, and I think the first guy the first took out is still alive." He said, "That was cool. How did you do that?" "Only good time young boy, for now let's just eat and talk about your training schedule with me as well as her old teacher," Naruto said, gesturing for them to sit down. Although he was prepared to act quickly to defend his charge, the teacher had to acknowledge that his perception of the blonde with the orange hair was gradually shifting. Entry 1 of the personal diary. "When I think about my team, I'm starting to question what the old man has been smoking. I mean, what has he been smoking, and should I be concerned? When I got to the classroom for the team assignment, I was really hoping that I would be assigned to someone other than these two. I'm not sure what it was, but I had a feeling that this day was going to be pretty bada, call it a hunch if you will. I can somewhat understand Sasuke's desire for vengeance, or as he puts it, being avenging what happened to his family, but I don't really have anything against him per se. To be honest, this will make him very difficult to work with, but it is still possible. I'm not sure what it is about Sakura that irritates me more, perhaps her bold attitude that she's always right, or the fact that she tries to hit me, but our other teammate leaves a lot to be desired. A keyword is being attempted. Perhaps it's because she's constantly so loud. In my previous life as a pirate, I encountered monkeys who were much quieter than she could ever hope to be. Once more, what the devil is he smoking? If it's that good, I'd like to try some of it." Naturally, they are not the only issue. Our so-called Sensei Kakashi Hitaki is another. I'd like to start by being upfront about this guy. He is consistently late, and I don't mean by a few minutes, I mean hours. She kept bugging him for a date and trying to get into his pants practically every 5 minutes while I sat in that classroom. My nerves were starting to give out after the first time, and I could tell it wasn't just me either. We would wait for this man for 2 more hours, while the other senseis and their students left within 10 minutes of our arrival. It wasn't a good first impression because I even set a trap for him and he fell for it. He merely muttered something about detesting us and instructed us to meet him on the roof. After we got there, he asked us to introduce ourselves in order to get to know us better. As an example, Sakura asked him to go first, and the only thing we found out was his name. That's his name, really. I could tell he was not impressed because after that was finished, we introduced ourselves to him and then gave each other the most menacing looks we could. Following the completion of these formalities, he informed us that even though we had successfully graduated from the academy, our status as the village's ninjas was still up in the air. He also told us that we still had one more test to take as a squad, which sadly had a high failure and/or dropout rate. He then went on to inform us that we had to arrive at a specific training facility at approximately 9 in the morning. His final advice before departing was to avoid eating breakfast because it might cause us to throw up. The other two immediately told me not to ruin things for them after he left, but I had no intention of obeying someone who couldn't even afford to be on time. Since I had no idea what he was planning, I felt that I should exercise extra caution tomorrow. Journal entry end. In contrast to his so-called sensei's advice, Naruto chose to eat a satisfying meal in remembrance of his time as a pirate and the significance of food for both himself and his crew. He woke up the following morning feeling rejuvenated and prepared for whatever the day held. He also detested admitting that he had hardly any time to talk to Tenten because we had been so busy preparing everything for his first team assignment as a ninja. Of course, this was made even more difficult by the fact that they had just been sent on a 2-week mission to deal with both band removal and escort. He simply felt that he would require all the assistance he could get, so he had also made the decision to use all of his clothes and equipment for this day. After completing his morning routine, he left the apartment and headed for the training ground his sensei had informed them about the day before. However, he chose to take his time because he knew his sensei would be late, to be honest. Although he hated not knowing what was ahead, he had to admit that his top concern was for his teammates. He considered visiting Tenten to find out what she had experienced with her final exam as a genin, but ultimately decided against it because the tests might be entirely different. He eventually reached the training area and made every effort to avoid detection. Regrettably, this meant he had to wait an additional hour and a half for his sensei to show up. Sakura yelled for everyone to hear that, despite his tardiness, he was at least present, unlike their other teammate Kakashi, who was only able to smile at the tree with his peculiar eyes. At first, the two of them were unable to decipher what was happening, but when they looked up, they saw their other teammate eating a green apple from a tree while dressed in rather odd attire. The two of them were shocked that he had been there for a while and they hadn't even noticed him when Naruto took a large bite out of the apple, looked down at them, and waved. "Are you trying to get us to fail this exam, you idiot?" Sakura asked, shocked that he had eaten something in spite of what Sensei had warned him not to do. He addressed them, observing their abrupt expression of realization as he said, "As I recall, Sakura, he never made it in order. It was in all honesty more of a suggestion that we should follow to have an easier time. But personally for me I work better on a full stomach. What about you?" Kakashi, on the other hand, calmed them down and pulled out a simple clock, which he then set to noon after realizing that things were going to get interesting and that this test would be different from the others. "Now the objective of this test is to get the bells from me before time runs out, and whoever does not have a bell will be sent back to the academy," Kakashi said as soon as Naruto leapt down from the tree, finishing the apple in the process and tossing it into a group of bushes so the animals could eat whatever was left. Then, using her innate abilities, Sakura noticed a crucial element. "But Kakashi-sensei, there are only 2 bells." "That's right, you see, no matter what, one of you is going back to the academy, so with that said you better come at me with the intent to kill or else you will never stand a chance," he said, giving them another of those strange eye smiles. "This makes almost no sense at all. Why does he want us fighting each other? But then again, now that I think about it, none of us would stand a chance against him on our own." Naruto concluded shockingly after noticing the look of complete terror and confusion on his teammates' faces. "He wants us to work as a team, but he's making it difficult to understand, and with my teammates' inflated egos, this will be a nightmare to get through." He realized how much trouble they were going to have today as the consequences of what was going to happen hit home. "Of course, they are rather late and stupid." Sensei then added a few words that he would later come to regret. Then Naruto had a brilliant, terrible idea. "Now then, to pass this part of the exam you had better come at me with the intent to kill, otherwise you will never pass this exam." "Oh, I know exactly what I should do." Then, with a rather eerie smile, Naruto said, "And with that said the test begins now," which made his alleged teammates uneasy. He said this, and the other 2 instantly fled, taking advantage of the trees and foliage around them. Naruto, on the other hand, chose to stand his ground rather than run in the hopes of feeling his sensei before letting loose like a loose cannon. He obviously lost a great deal of respect for this particular jonin after the so-called sensei pulled out a small orange book instead of attempting to use his lone surviving student as a remotely credible threat. Given his previous life, his respect for the other sex, and the fact that he had a daughter in that previous life, Naruto was well aware that this was a pornographic book that had seen many men beaten by their partners. As a result, he was not particularly fond of these books. "What the hell are you doing? Are you seriously reading a porn novel during this test?" he asked, feeling compelled to join the many women who beat the living daylights out of the numerous perverts in this village. Naruto rolled his eyes at this, knowing full well that he was no longer going to hold back, Of course I am Naruto, besides I want to see what happens next. After all, I doubt you'll be much of a threat. Naruto then created up to 20 shadow clones, knowing that they would be very useful for his plans. They then began singing a sea shanty about his former mentor. It's a damn good day to die. Teach met his fate on the shores of Carolina. A challenge ran out across the waves. Kakashi kept reading his book without giving much thought to what would happen, but he had to confess that he found this odd song to be rather frightening and wondered where his prospective pupil had learned it. What next caught his attention, though, was the volume of smoke emanating from a summoning seal. Kakashi was a little taken aback when he looked up from his book to see a very odd weapon that was nearly as large as his pupil. A number of the clones were pointing directly at him without any indication that the strange weapon was there, and they suddenly started shooting at him. Kakashi would have undoubtedly been struck by the projectile if he hadn't spent so many years in active combat. Fortunately, he managed to dodge it just in time, as the cannonball struck a tree, shattering it in 2 pieces and scattering splinters all over the place. Unable to contain his laughter, one of the clones said, "Shiver me timbers, he moved. Now let's see if he can keep reading that book, boys." After all of them started drawing their weapons and aiming at their aspiring sensei, Kakashi proceeded to view this specific student as a slightly greater threat as the guns started to fire. After swiftly hiding behind a nearby tree, Kakashi watched as the tree was torn apart by the bullets that struck several of them as they flew by. When Kakashi turned around, he saw that not only was the big weapon gone, but all of Naruto's were as well. Naturally, Kakashi wasn't prepared for his rather odd student to be attempting to persuade the others to join him in order to obtain those bells. He did this because he believed that their egos were a bit too large, claiming that they could either obtain them independently or that, in Sakura's case, her sulky knight would do it for her. He wondered again how she had made it this far, so he chose to just observe the show from a distance if they chose to attempt handling everything alone. Sakura proved to be easy prey to a fairly basic illusion technique, which kept her out of action for a short while. Sasuke was the first to almost get his hands on one of the bells and demonstrate that at least the 2 males were not to be taken lightly. "Yep, that's just way too easy," said Naruto when he finally spotted what looked like the bells on the ground. Kakashi remained hidden in order to watch what this specific student would do, but what he did next truly caused Sensei, the wannabe, to slap his own face. He yelled for everyone to hear, "Hey you guys, there are bells on the ground." Naruto looked up at her and said, "Sure you don't want to work with me and possibly convince Sasuke as well, knowing that we need to work together to get the bells?" Sakura had emerged from the bush and had gone on to grab the bells before being lifted high into the air by the trap. She addressed him in a rather impolite manner, saying, "I'm not going back to the academy just so you can stay on a team with my Sasuke." He then walked back into the forest without even attempting to reach for the bells on the ground, saying, "Okay, but don't say that I didn't warn you." Not surprisingly, Sakura was tied to a pole in the training area where the clock was located when the buzzer sounded. "Do you know why you failed?" The other 2 attempted to offer an explanation, but Naruto summed it up in a single sentence. It was all about teamwork. Despite the fact he did try to kill me and blow me up, he was the only one who totally grasped what this test was all about and even tried to get you to work with him, Kakashi said, grinning at him before pointing to the other 2. Following their disbelief that the so-called dead had finally figured out the test when they hadn't, Kakashi approached a rather large stone with what appeared to be writing on it and asked, "Do you know what this stone is?" Kakashi observed that his assassin student was remaining silent in order to see what the other 2 would think of, but Naruto remained silent as he looked to his teammates, who were clearly trying to figure it out. It was obvious that he might know. "This is the memorial stone. All of the names on it were lost while performing their duties, slain in action," he informed them. "I've decided to give you one more chance, but if you feed Sakura any of those lunches I will fail you and send you right back to the academy," Kakashi said after presenting Naruto and Sasuke with 2 box lunches. He vanished from sight as soon as he finished speaking, and Naruto and Sasuke were close enough to realize that they would not be able to defeat their sensei if they did not share their lunch with Sakura. Just as they were starting to feed her, Kakashi reappeared and told him they had passed. Naruto was then instructed to meet his new team the following day at the same location and time, but he was currently meeting with someone regarding a very significant project. He was glad that both of his parents had bequeathed their fortunes to him, and he was able to use the information on the banknotes in the hidden room to take control of them in order to finance this project. The ship was built to be able to fight, but it won't have any weapons or significant parliament until you are a certified ninja. Fortunately, that was no longer an issue, and Tenten's father had assisted him in developing unique ship-based weapons, one of which he had used in the test against his useless sensei, were now being shipped here. Right now, the only issue was how long it would take to complete the ship and test her to make sure everything was functioning. Naruto entered and looked at the ship that was being built, knowing that it would be useful later. The man in question was Tenten's father's contact, and he worked in the naval department, which specialized in unusual designs and ships. The lead architect then approached him and said, "The ship is already about 60% finished, and at your request, we have started installing the cannons and other weapons. It should be another month or so before she is ready to sail. Have you decided on a name yet?" After examining the ship carefully, Naruto turned to the architect and said, "I have some ideas, but I haven't decided yet. I feel we're going to need her, so just get her combat and sailing ready."
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.